We lost some audience.
Okay, great. Welcome everybody. Excited to be joined by this awesome panel as we talk common sense crypto policy. I'm going to go through some quick introductions of the folks joining me, and then we're going to get right into it. We'll start with Calvert on my right, who is the head of U.S. policy for Coinbase. Kara has spent her career in various government regulations and lobbying positions and is originally from Wyoming, so she is back in her home western states. Following Kara, we have Senator Chris Hansen, who represents the 31st District of Colorado and joins us with a focus on energy and tax for most of his political career, and has been proposing legislation to further crypto and encourage the innovation and support within the Colorado space. And rounding us out, last but not least, is Commissioner Tung from the Division of Securities for Colorado. And interesting fact about the commissioner, she was the first general counsel for the Ethereum Foundation. So thank you all for joining me, and let's get right into it. I want to start at the federal level. We'll dive into the states shortly thereafter, but following up on Commissioner Peirce's fireside chat, I thought it would be good just to kind of get a lay of the land on some of the legislation that we know Coinbase is very actively monitoring. Kara's team leading the advocacy in DC. So let's just set the stage. TLDR, Kara, what are you looking at? What are the bills that are floating around the Hill right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all. And I think we need more regulators like Commissioner Peirce, honestly, in Washington, and people who are really thoughtful, who are thinking about these new technologies and new use cases. It's really exciting. I always get really jazzed after I hear her speak because it makes me have faith again in regulators. So what does it mean in Washington right now? Right now, we've got a regulatory system that really isn't working for crypto, as you all know, and it's creating this downward pressure, not just on companies like Coinbase, but on all of you, on all the builders, on all of the innovators who are worried about having an SEC subpoena a day after they maybe create a new token. So what we're really working for in Washington is to create a very clear legislative framework that helps us identify how we actually put rules around commodities, something like Bitcoin, Ethereum, you name the list. We have 240 of them on our platform because we don't list securities. I have to put that out there. But we need something for these commodities. We need a framework at a federal level. Then we need something for stablecoins, mostly because the regulators don't really understand them and they're kind of afraid of them, but really they're the big killer app right now. And so we really want to create this foundation for the growth of stablecoins. And then third, we really want to make sure that we can offer digital asset securities. What a great opportunity to actually raise capital to do some really unique things. So the legislation we're pushing for would really do all three of those. There's something called Fit 21 that addresses the commodities side and the security side. It puts it in the CFTC and the SEC and creates very clear rules for both the people who distribute them, for the people who issue them, and then for companies like Coinbase who are a centralized intermediary. So it's really exciting. And then there's stablecoin legislation out there. Both of them are bipartisan. Both of them have been passed through bipartisan committees, and both of them have a shot at getting into law, but it really takes the work of a lot of constituents, a lot of really important members, and a lot of regulators to bring that to fruition.
Awesome. That's a really helpful overview. So as we are in this world of, for now anyway, legislative ambiguity, when we don't really have any of these bills signed into law yet, we're in this state where the SEC continues to act either through regulation by enforcement. We've seen a significant amount of cases brought last year against the platforms, the most recent of which is Kraken. And also continue to promulgate rules. You know, custody came out, Hester Peirce commented on the change to the definition of exchange and broker. As we are still in this kind of limbo period, should we continue to expect the SEC to focus on enforcement, maybe some more rulemaking? What do we think 2024 looks like?
Well, I think we'll continue to see rules around the edges, and that's kind of what we've seen with the brokers. It's what we've seen with the IRS broker rules, so we're seeing it in different places. I think where we don't expect to see it is truly in the nuts and bolts of digital assets. In fact, Coinbase petitioned the SEC about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, to write rules. And after a year and after taking them to court and filing our own lawsuit and saying, hey, we just want rules, tell us yes or no, they finally, after a year, came back and said no. We are not going to write rules. So we don't have any high hopes that the SEC is going to help resolve these issues under this chairman.
Commissioner Chan, I'm curious from your perspective, is your job more difficult or maybe even potentially easier given the lack of clarity from the SEC right now on digital assets?
Well, my job certainly is influenced by what the federal government does, but we also have state laws, and it hasn't been, it hasn't been that difficult because we are able to, at least in Colorado, we've seen a lot of actual clear fraud, and we were able to enforce against that. So I don't consider that regulation by enforcement. I think you guys may have heard of the index coin case, where it's just pure fraud, and in those cases, I don't think it's healthy for the ecosystem or for any of the investors if we didn't take action. So in that way, I don't think that we have actually struggled with what people in the industry may be struggling with at the federal level.
Great. One more question on more of a federal level, then we'll dive into the states. Again, 2023, I'm going to bring back to something that happened then. We had those two arguably conflicting opinions that came out in the Second Circuit of New York on both Terra Luna and Ripple. Are these tokens securities? They're currently in appeal. We obviously don't have clarity there. We, again, as we said, don't have clarity in terms of a federal rule. Thoughts from the panel on what these two conflicting opinions mean right now? How should we think about operating until we get either the appeals done or maybe some rulemaking or legislation?
Well, I think that what is interesting in these two opinions, besides the fact that they do seem to conflict in the determination of whether something is a security in a secondary market, I think what's really interesting is that they both seem to focus on the fact that whether crypto is a security depends on how that crypto is transacted. And they go back to Howey. So if you guys know Howey, that test was about orange groves. Now, everybody in the audience, if I said orange groves, you don't think security. But how that orange grove was sold to investors, how that was promoted, that's what the security is. And I think both of the Rakoff and Torres, those are the judges in the Ripple and Terra case, both came out and said, yeah, when we assess whether something's a security, we're going to look at how it's transacted. And I actually think that's a lot of clarity coming from the courts, and I think that's actually good, because now we know even conflicting opinions agree that what we're going to look at is how it's transacted. And frankly, I think that goes back to the cornerstone of what securities is about, which is if you're going to sell something to your mom or your uncle or your friends who are not securities experts, and you're going to hype it, and you're going to tell them a bunch of lies, that's not fair to them. And so that's the cornerstone of it. So no matter what it is, if it's sold like that, you're going to have securities problems, generally.
Yeah, I would just add that I think we're obviously watching those cases closely. We have our own case. The SEC has sued us for transacting, basically for offering securities on our platform. We do not believe those 12 assets are securities, and so we are also going through our own court case in New York. And I think what we are seeing is that it's really important that these court cases move forward and we continue to get clarity from the courts in the absence, because I think you kind of said, what do we do while we're waiting for these court cases to resolve? These appeals can last years. I think what we are going to continue to push for is clarity from legislators, and so making sure that at the federal level, we do move forward on a federal standard. And in the states, I think the states have a real opportunity to actually have some laboratories, I keep using the saying of laboratories of innovation, that there are some opportunities, I think, for different innovators, builders to go into these states and hopefully innovate and go to a state where they have really smart commissioners who can work with them on what that looks like. And so we're really excited, even though we have court cases and we think we're going to win ours, so we're also really excited.
That is a perfect segue into the states. Thank you. So let's dive into some of the things that are happening more locally, and what better place to start than Colorado. I think Colorado has kind of been at the forefront of supporting innovation and entrepreneurship in the blockchain and digital asset space, which is great. I mean, you can pay your taxes with digital assets. You can pay your DMV with digital assets. That's kind of, I actually didn't realize that. That's really wild to me. So that's great. So let's start with you, Senator Hansen. What do you think? What do you think that Colorado is doing right? And how are you fostering this innovation? And how, like, what could other states learn? Like, what is your secret sauce?
Yeah, I really appreciate the invitation to share a little bit about what we've been doing in Colorado. The one thing you forgot to mention is you can also donate to your favorite state Senate candidate using secure token and crypto.
Go.
So not only can you pay your taxes, but you can also do political donations. So we changed state law for that too. I guess the other thing that I think has been interesting in Colorado is we've been trying to think about how we can use secure token technology, blockchain technology for state debt as well. And there's been some examples of this on the municipal level, but to my understanding, not any other states that have done this yet. And so I've been working closely with the state treasurer over the last couple of years to really transition Colorado into being able to use this new technology. And so we're not just stuck with kind of the vanilla Wall Street version of state debt, which has tons of overhead, lots of fees, and why are we wasting taxpayer money paying a bunch of analysts on Wall Street when we could do this directly and really democratize our debt instruments as a state? So that was kind of the piece I really focused on a couple of years ago. We've done the enabling legislation on that. The state treasurer was required to go and do a study and show that it would work. Guess what? It works. And so we're ready to move forward with starting to offer these types of instruments. So that's kind of, I think, the next big thing in Colorado.
That's so wild. Do you think that the continued ability to show consumptive use and real-world cases for digital assets will have any influence on the SEC as they're thinking through their rule promulgation, like security versus not? I mean, these things are very clearly usable and practical.
Yeah, well, I would just add to that whole idea of theory of change. I do a lot of work in the energy and environment space as well. And if you think back to things like the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, those started as state laws. And as soon as we got to 5, 6, a dozen states who moved forward, then Washington, D.C. finally got in gear.
Yep.
And so that's kind of been my theory of change on a lot of different policy fronts as a state legislator, is let me work in Colorado, get some cutting edge legislation in place, and then reach out to my colleagues around the country and say, hey, let's work on this together, because that's how we force the kind of create a forcing function for D.C. to catch up.
So taking a step out of Colorado, on the point you just made, California just came out with their own digital asset framework, and they mirrored it largely off of New York with the BIT license out there. So to your point of multiple states kind of getting in some sort of conformity, some sort of uniform approach to anything, maybe influences the federal government, thoughts on whether or not California or New York are kind of taking the right approach is one part of the question. The other part is, do you think there's actually a chance that the states could get some sort of mass framework or at least some sort of material amount of movement in that regard that would actually influence the federal government?
Well, first of all, I think I meant to say this right at the beginning, but I'm really speaking on behalf of myself and not of the division and Dora. I think that the states have a real opportunity to be a laboratory for innovation, and I don't know if the BIT license and one that New York has and the one that California is adopting is the way to go. I mean, many of you probably have tried to interact with those licenses, and I don't know that it has proven to be successful for first movers, so I don't know if that's what's going to catch, but I think that we have an opportunity to be innovating in the space, and I hope that if we have some good ideas, they will catch, because we do need to be thinking more out of the box than I think we have been. And I wouldn't knock the regulators, because what they're trying to do is they are the stop signs. You guys are the fast cars. You're the innovators. And they are the stop signs to make sure little dogs and old ladies don't get run over. So they are thinking from a different space. And I understand that cautiousness, but I think that there's still space for innovations on how to keep people safe, but also allow for innovation. And I hope that the states will be able to play a significant role in that kind of innovation.
I'll just quickly add on to that. We have tons of examples in other policy areas of multi-state compacts and regulators working together across state lines. I mean, if we can have a doctor opt in to Colorado, we can probably figure this out. I think Colorado will continue to push and look for ways to cooperate with other states.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing, because we have 45 money transmission licenses, we've got a BIT license, we're working on California. We're literally, we're now Hawaii is now contemplating it. They're going through their sandbox, and that is now going to a situation where people can operate there again. So we'll be everywhere. And what we have found is that harmonization is really important absent of federal law. But there are other things that can be done that I think are really unique. Like, that is an awesome idea that you were just discussing about the state debt. And I think that there are things that can be exported, these awesome ideas. I heard one in Boston a couple of weeks ago about all future record keeping being done on the blockchain. Because you can't do 300 years of record keeping on the blockchain, but you can do it going forward. So any new record keeping needs to be required on the blockchain. So there are different ideas that are just going to help promote the use. Does it get us to a federal framework? Does it get us to a framework that's identical in every state? No, that's just the reality. It's very hard. We've seen this in money transmission licenses. We've had model laws, and the model laws just don't stick. So ultimately, I think there are other areas where we can be innovative in the states.
I'm going to bring it back to Colorado one more time. So again, tons of history, or tons of precedent to look at in terms of the innovative support here. You have the Digital Token Act of 2019, which addresses a little bit of registration exemption for things that might be securities, depending on the consumptive use. That's super supportive. On the other side, Colorado is very clearly focused on consumer protection. The recently announced index coin case that Commissioner Chan's department brought, which I know we can't go into too much detail with you, but it's kind of interesting that Colorado has found a way to thread the needle with both seemingly right-sized regulation and enforcement, which we all need, and we agree, we need the stop signs. We want the stop signs. I mean, there's a reason that that exists, but at the same time, creating these frameworks that allow for the innovation and the development and has continued to bring business in here. So would love to hear from both of you on how Colorado has, like I said, thread that needle with both sides of it.
Well, I think that I've been in this space since about late 2014, 2015, and I started when the Ethereum Genesis block was launched, so way back. And I think the space itself has changed. And so I think the secret sauce to how it works has changed as well. With FTX and Celsius and Voyager's collapse, among many, there's been a change, I think, in the atmosphere and understanding more that you don't want to be defrauded either, right? You're building, but you're also part of the ecosystem. And so part of that is that we do enforce. We enforce fraud, but we don't do regulation by enforcement. That is to say, if there's some confusion as to whether it's fraud, and that confusion is legitimate and it's really ambiguous, you're probably not in our crosshairs. But if you're like in the index coin case, the regulados didn't actually have a platform, the cryptocurrency was essentially worthless, and they told them, they confessed in a YouTube video that's now viral about how they did steal $1.3 million. Yes, we're going to prosecute that. We're going to protect Coloradans from that. And I think a combination of making this work is that part of it, with the idea that we want you to innovate, we want you to move forward, and we want to find ways to allow that to happen. And a lot of that is through the legislature, and also the fact that we as the division do not enforce do not do regulation by enforcement. So I think it's some combination of that.
Yeah, I'll just emphasize that point. Like, I think we have a great tradition of great consumer protection in this state. I think we've been ahead of the curve in some of our consumer protection laws, working on some right now in this session that are trying to put in better protections with relation to some of the social media platforms. But that said, we do want to be a state where we can grow new things and try new things and fast fail and explore new options. And the state government is a $42 billion enterprise. We've got tons of financial transactions, tons of record keeping, lots happening in the healthcare space. There's just massive number of new opportunities here. And I think as a state government, we want to send that signal that we want you to come to Colorado and try new things. And we've got a legislature, about a half dozen of us that pay a lot of attention to this area. And we want to put in legislation that's going to open up those doors. So hopefully, very, very open atmosphere here to help improve operations of state government, our finances, our record keeping, and super great consumer protection.
I would add that a part of it is also that we have a really smart, forward, tech-thinking governor, and we have senators that are so smart in the tech space, and that really makes a big difference, I think, in Colorado's progress.
I would just add, I actually think this is from an outsider looking in. I'm not a neighbor anymore in Wyoming. Now I'm actually a true outsider living in DC. But what I find fascinating is we launched something called Stand With Crypto that has become this nationwide effort. And where we see the most activity is where you have the states that are most forward-leaning. So I think ETHDenver is a big part of this, right? You have people who are excited. You have people who are willing to have conversations with people like you. I think that that's really important. And if you want states to continue to be forward-leaning, you have to come out of the woodwork and you have to make your voice heard.
So that leads into another really good question. This audience is obviously very invested in what's happening at the legislative level, both state and federal. What are things people can be doing, either from an advocacy perspective, education perspective? How can we get our voices heard and try to continue to push protective yet innovative, supportive legislation at both the state and federal level? What would you advocate people to do?
Well, I would answer this question as I would with almost any advocacy group, which is I often joke that you pass bills in September, not April. So our legislative session in Colorado, January to May, we are working hard on bills for those 120 days, but you pass hard bills by working on them the year before. So get to know your state rep, get to know your state senator, go have coffee. I guarantee you, if you reach out to them directly, they'd be happy to set up time with you. Let them hear directly from you, from your company, from the group of advocates you're working with on whatever topic it might be, and that certainly applies to crypto and blockchain as it would to anything else that we work on. The Colorado legislature looks at 800 bills a year. A couple dozen are related to this area, and work hard on those over the summer and fall so that you can be successful the next session.
And I would say join Stand With Crypto. It's my super selfish plug here, but ultimately it gives you the tools. They're on-chain tools if you're interested in being on-chain, using a wallet to do a lot of these different activities. Show up at the different events. So we'll have some activities tomorrow here that we're talking about Stand With Crypto. We have a big event in LA. If any of you are from LA, we have a big event on Monday with Nas. To be clear, I was telling my children and my husband about this. Sorry for the side note here. And my kids were super excited. They're like, Lil Nas. My husband was like, no. It's the original. It's Nas. And he went out and he got his first album that he bought. It was Nas. So it was very exciting. So he is going to speak because he's he's actually a crypto advocate. He cares deeply. He released 2 songs as NFTs. So he is going to be there, and then he's going to do a performance. Brian Armstrong will also be there. So if you're in LA, show up at the Bourbon Room at 4 p.m. on Monday.
I think I just figured out what I'm doing on Monday.
Please come. Please come.
Okay, so 2024, big political year for us. We've got presidency, state the obvious there, and many congressional elections. Would love to get the thoughts from all of you on what you think could happen from a crypto regulatory outlook in 2024, depending on how these elections end up going.
All right. As the politician on the stage, I guess I can start with that one. Well, let me start with Colorado. Colorado is going to remain in Democrat control. So this is the first cycle in a very long time where the control of the Senate or the House is not in question. I mean, it's decades since that has happened, but we now have supermajority in the House, 46 out of 65. In the Senate, we're 23 out of 35, and have a very good shot at having a supermajority after this next election. So that is going to remain stable. It means reach out to me and my colleagues if you have ideas for legislation for next year, because it means that we have a lot of time to focus on policy, quite frankly. In previous years, we would spend big chunks of our year working on politics and trying to win the next cycle and the next election. And we have a little bit of a luxury because of where things have shifted in Colorado to have more time on policy. Would love to talk to anybody in the room over the summer and the fall to get ready for next year. Quickly on the national front, I have come to the conclusion at this point, anything can change, that this is going to come down to about 75,000 people in 3 or 4 states. Colorado I can tell you where our electoral votes are going at this point. I mean, again, anything can change, but there's 4 states that are in question. You know, so if you want to have an impact on the national election this time around, contact your friends in Wisconsin, Michigan, you know, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I'll let you decide what the 4th state is, because that looks like where all the action's going to happen.
Well, last year I was asked this question about this year, and I was like, I think Ripple's going to get decided. So I think that's true, but I didn't understand that Terra was going to come kind of sidelining it. So I think legally on that side, we should be looking at that space and seeing if the Second Circuit Court of Appeals takes up that issue, watching how Ripple and Terra turn out, watching the Coinbase case. I think there's a lot of really pivotal legislation, really pivotal court cases coming out. If you guys remember Howey, if the case that you use to determine if crypto is a security, that case came out of the U.S. Supreme Court and has been holding firm for 60 years. So, you know, our system is supposed to be part legislation, part courts, and part executive. And so I think there's a lot to watch also on the judicial legislation side. I would keep that space and keep your eye on that.
Yeah, and I think politically, that 2024 is going to be the biggest election ever for crypto, just hands down, full stop. And I think it's at the presidential level, it is at your federal level with your legislators, with members of Congress, with the Senate, at the state legislator level. It's actually a really interesting issue because it's bipartisan, and you've got different legislators coming at it. It's particularly, I think, acute at the state level, where you see different people coming to the issue for different reasons. But at the federal level, it's bipartisan. And what we've done from Coinbase perspective is, obviously, we launched Stand with Crypto, and that's now its own independent organization, and they're engaging in races. They are talking about races. You can go to the website and you can see scorecards for every single race out there. You can see where your incumbent is. You can see where the candidates are, if they've come and if they've made a statement on crypto or if they're active. And then at the presidential level, it's the same thing. You can see all the information about the presidential candidates and where they stand on crypto. So I think it's going to be a very important year because regulators matter. Hester Peirce, Commissioner Peirce matters, right? Who chairs the agencies matter. And so the presidential matters a lot. And then, again, all of there are 435 House races, 33 Senate races, and then hundreds and hundreds and hundreds across the different states. So get involved.
Well, just quickly on that, there's really only 30 congressional races. I mean, if we're honest about it, right? There are 435 on the ballot. There's less than 10% that are actually competitive for a whole bunch of reasons. Gerrymandering at the top of that list for me.
Yep.
But to be realistic, it's a very small number that are actually competitive.
But they're all running. They're all running for re-election. They all care about who shows up at the ballot box, especially with the presidential that's unclear. So you're totally right. And something that's R plus 36, probably not a big race.
I would just say, as an administrator and the regulatory side, I would say that, you know, one thing I would hope that doesn't happen is that crypto ends up being a bipartisan issue.
100%.
What we have seen in certain states is that somehow it has become with the UCC, and I'm not going to get too in the weeds because nobody wants to talk about the UCC except me. But what we saw with the UCC, which is normally just everybody agrees because it's only about commercial transactions, for the first time in decades, it became a political issue, and certain governors just said, "Oh, this is a political issue. We're not going to take it." You know, that I don't think that's healthy for the ecosystem. I hope that both sides see its economic value and can keep it out of that particular. You know, once it gets there, then you don't have conversations anymore. People just say it's red or blue, right? Yeah. And I don't think that's the way crypto is. Crypto's everybody.
Right. We really don't want this to be a wedge issue. I think that's a really important piece, right? It's a bipartisan issue. Right. We don't want it to be a wedge issue. We want everybody to come to the table.
All right. We can count it down. Final round robin question. Biggest headline of 2024 when we're sitting here a year from now?
It's got to be the presidential election. I mean, I don't know what that's going to say, but I imagine that will be the biggest headline.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I hope that's the biggest headline.
I mean, for the globe, for this industry, for everything we're talking about, yeah. I mean, that's the biggest headline.
I think we're going to hit 2.5 trillion. I don't know. I think we're going to think the market cap is going to go back up. I think there's going to be a lot of stable coins in circulation. I can't make predictions, but I think that the big headline is going to be that crypto is back. That we go through cycles, and it's an exciting year. 2024 is spring, 2025 is summer.
I like it. We'll end with that. Thank you so much. This was a great conversation.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you.